By the fourth day of rain, being wet is no longer your biggest problem. Ugh, everything is wet. The ground beneath you. The hides near the entrance. The branches you collected 2 days ago. The bedding. The wood. Even the air seems wet. Outside the shelter, the forest looks different now. The herd your group was following has disappeared. The tracks are gone. The trail has become mud. And the river you crossed only a few days earlier is now wider, faster, and carrying branches downstream. But the most dangerous change is happening behind you. The fire is getting smaller. And if that flame goes out, a miserable week could become something much worse. That is the moment rain stops being weather. It becomes a survival problem. Today, 7 days of rain means canceled plans. You stay inside. You order food. Maybe you complain that you haven't seen the sun all week. But tens of thousands of years ago, there was no normal life waiting safely on the other side of the storm. Because the storm had already changed normal life. Hunting changed. Travel changed. Food changed. Shelter changed. Fire changed. And perhaps most importantly, time changed. So what actually happened inside a Stone Age camp when the sky refused to clear? We can't watch one of those storms. Archaeology doesn't preserve a diary saying, Day 4, still raining, everyone bored. But it preserves something almost as useful. The shelters. The hearths. The tools. The bedding. The food remains. The tiny stone flakes scattered around places where people work. Put those clues together, and a week of rain starts looking very different from 7 days of waiting. Because before anyone worried about boredom, they had to survive the night. And the first enemy wasn't hunger. It was cold. Your body is constantly producing heat. Rain gives that heat a much easier way to escape. Wet skin. Wet hair. Wet hides. Wet clothing. Conditions that are merely uncomfortable when you're dry can become dangerous after hours of being soaked. And night makes everything worse. Even in landscapes we imagine as warm, temperatures can fall sharply after sunset, especially at elevation or during certain seasons. So the first rule is obvious. Get out of the rain. But that immediately creates another problem. Because humans aren't the only animals looking for shelter. A cave or rock overhang isn't automatically safe just because it has a roof. Water can pour across the floor. Runoff can suddenly appear where there was none yesterday. A nearby river can rise. Wind can drive rain deep into the entrance. And if an entire group is sharing the same protected space, where everyone sits matters. So the best shelter isn't simply a cave. It's the right part of the cave. High enough to stay dry. Deep enough to escape the worst wind. Open enough for smoke to leave. Close enough to the entrance that you can still see. And once you've found that place, your entire night may depend on one thing. Fire. Humans had been interacting with and controlling fire for an extraordinarily long time. Sites such as Wonderwerk Cave in South Africa preserve evidence pushing human use of fire deep into prehistory. But there is a major difference between having fire and needing to create it again after you've lost it. A flame already burning is incredibly valuable. A flame that has gone out means finding dry tinder, dry fuel, the right material, the right method. And rain attacks all of them. The grass is damp. The bark is damp. The branches are damp. Even the ground beneath the fire may be damp. So keeping a fire alive may be far easier than replacing one. And suddenly, one of the least dramatic jobs in camp becomes one of the most important. Someone has to watch the flame. Add fuel. Move damp wood closer so it can dry. Turn it. Split soaked branches and expose the drier interior. Protect the tinder. Keep smoke moving toward the opening. Check the fire. Then check it again. And again. And again. This is what prehistoric survival probably looked like much of the time. Not one spectacular trick. Dozens of small decisions made before any of them became emergencies. There is a reason fire-making materials eventually became personal equipment. When Ötzi died in the Alps more than 5,000 years ago, he was carrying materials associated with making and maintaining fire. Fire wasn't simply something nice to have. It was infrastructure. Heat. Light. Cooking. Drying. Protection. And after sunset, the center of human activity. But suppose the group succeeds. The shelter is dry enough. The fire survives. Nobody is freezing. And the storm keeps falling. Now a completely different problem appears. What do people actually do when they can't travel very far? Because eventually there is nothing left to do except wait. Or at least, that's what it looks like. The archaeological records suggest something very different. And before the rain finally stops, the group may end up maintaining something even more valuable than its fire. But we'll come back to that. First, look at the ground. Prehistoric shelters aren't filled only with evidence of sleeping and eating. They're filled with work. At places where stone tools were made, archaeologists find enormous quantities of tiny flakes. Every strike against a stone core removes material. Enough work in one place leaves a signature in the ground. So imagine the scene. Rain pounds against the rock outside. Near the hearth, someone picks up yesterday's spear point. One edge is damaged. Another tool is dull. A wooden shaft has loosened. A handle needs replacing. None of these problems feels urgent while everyone is trapped inside. But once the rain stops, any one of them could decide whether the next hunt succeeds. So you don't wait until then. You repair them now. And suddenly, what looked like a lost hunting day becomes something else. Preparation. Because survival isn't only about solving the problem in front of you. It's about being ready for the problem that comes next. And stone was only one material that needed attention. Prehistoric people worked bone, wood, hide, plant fibers, pigments. At Blombos Cave in South Africa, archaeologists even found evidence of deliberate ochre processing roughly 100,000 years ago. Whatever the precise purpose of every object, the larger pattern is clear. People used time indoors to work, and one of the most valuable things a storm may have provided was uninterrupted time. Consider a bone needle. Making one isn't something you casually finish while pursuing prey. The bone has to be selected, shaped, smooth, pierced, then used with some kind of thread or sinew. But once you can sew, something important changes. A damaged garment does not automatically become useless. You repair it. And during a week of cold rain, the most valuable survival tool you own may not be the spear beside you. It may be whatever is wrapped around your body. But even clothing leads to another technology so ordinary that we barely notice it. String. Take cordage away from your world, and an astonishing number of things become harder. Attaching a stone point to a shaft. Tying parts of a shelter together. Bundling materials. Carrying objects. Making nets. Making some traps. Repairing equipment. A huge amount of technology depends on one deceptively simple ability. Twisting flexible material together. And making it stay together. Archaeologists have even found direct evidence that Neanderthals were producing twisted fibers tens of thousands of years ago. Does that mean Neanderthals invented string because it was raining? Of course not. And this is where we have to be careful. Archaeology can tell us what people were capable of doing. It can sometimes tell us where they did it. It usually cannot tell us whether rain was falling on the exact afternoon someone repaired a hide or twisted a fiber. But that isn't really the point. Rain didn't need to invent the technology. It only needed to reorganize the day. Things that could wait during good weather suddenly had time. Repair this. Sharpen that. Replace this binding. Prepare that material. Because sooner or later, the rain would stop. And when it did, there might not be much time to get ready. But tools weren't the only things people maintained. They maintained the place around them. At Situ Cave in South Africa, archaeologists found evidence of plant bedding tens of thousands of years old. People carried grasses and other plant material into the shelter and created surfaces for resting. Some of those plant choices may even have helped discourage insects. Think about what that means. These weren't creatures stumbling into caves, collapsing onto bare stone, and waiting for morning. They changed the space. They brought material inside. They arranged where they slept. They cleaned living areas. They made an uncomfortable place less uncomfortable, which sounds almost boring, until you realize how recognizably human it is. But remember that other thing the group may have been maintaining? Something potentially more valuable than the fire? It wasn't a tool. It wasn't food. And archaeologists can't dig it out of the ground. Information. Once movement slows and people spend hours around the same fire, they talk. Conversation leaves no fossil. So this part of prehistoric life is much harder to reconstruct directly. But studies of more recent hunter-gatherer communities give us an intriguing clue. During active parts of the day, conversation often revolves around immediate problems: food, movement, work, conflict, things that need solving now. But evening firelight creates a different social environment. Stories become more important. Songs, memories, descriptions of people who aren't present, events from the past, information that may be useless tonight, but vital months or years later. And now imagine what that means in a world without writing. One experienced hunter knows how a particular animal behaves when wounded. Another person remembers a water source several valleys away. Someone knows which plant makes people sick. Someone remembers a route used during a drought years earlier. None of that information lives in a book. It lives inside people. And if those people never pass it on, the knowledge can disappear with them. Suddenly, a weakened science shelter has another possible use. Teaching. A child watches someone repair a tool. Another person learns to twist fibers. Someone demonstrates how to prepare a material. A story contains information about where animals move during a certain season. A warning becomes a memory. A memory becomes a lesson. A skill moves from one pair of hands to another. Knowledge moves from one mind to another. The fire keeps bodies alive. But information helps keep the group alive long after the fire goes out. That is culture in one of its most basic forms. Not something rain created. Something rain may have given people more time to practice. And then, after days of hearing the same sound, something changes. You notice it before you see anything. The constant hammering of water against the rock becomes softer, then uneven, then occasional, then quiet. People begin moving toward the entrance. The fire is still burning. The tools have been repaired. Clothing has been patched. Materials have been prepared. Knowledge has been shared. And outside, the world isn't the sun-seen world they left several days earlier. The rain has changed it. Mud preserves tracks differently from hard ground. Fresh impressions may reveal where animals moved during the storm. Water now sits in depressions that were dry before. Plants respond. In some environments, fungi appear. Certain insects may become more abundant. Softened ground can change how easily some roots and tubers are worked. So the storm that made survival harder has also created new information. The question now isn't simply, as the rain stopped, it's, what did the rain change? And the people who can answer that question have an advantage. Because the real challenge was never simply surviving rain. It was surviving change. Ancient humans couldn't overpower every environment. They couldn't even see your own hand in son of human history that's rich when the sun set, the world went into exodus. They couldn't force a herd to return. They couldn't command a flooded river to become safe. What they could do was change their behavior. When movement was possible, they moved. When hunting was productive, they hunted. When weather forced them under cover, they maintained fire, repaired equipment, worked materials, improved shelter, shared knowledge, prepared. And when conditions changed again, so did they. So what did Stone Age humans actually do when it rained for a week? There was probably no single answer. Different people, different climates, different technologies, different shelters. But they almost certainly did not simply switch life off and wait for the world to restart. The storm changed the schedule. Travel shrank. Work moved closer to the fire. Things that had been postponed suddenly had time. Tools became sharper. Clothing was repaired. Fuel was protected. Skills had an audience. Information had time to spread. And when the clouds finally broke, the group didn't simply walk back into the same world. They walked into a changed landscape, better prepared to change with it. Rain probably didn't invent technology. It didn't invent art. And it didn't invent culture. But it did something simpler. Something that may have mattered just as much. It changed how humans use time. And one of the oldest human survival skills may still be the same one we depend on today. When the world ruins the plan, make a different plan.